All right, welcome to another episode of the Legacy Builders podcast with Kyle McGee. Today, we have Mr. Jeremy Johnson. Jeremy Johnson is a Pensacola area native and seasoned real estate professional with 2 decades of real estate experience. He has closed more than 1,200 transactions and is a partner in the area's top producing real estate team, the Mark Lee team. Jeremy is also the sales director of Levin Rinke Realty, a locally owned real estate company with more than 350 agents, where his leadership and guidance has been instrumental in the company's continued success. Jeremy is also a partner in the Sunchase Property Group. Jeremy's primarily focused on the operational aspects of multifamily projects. Jeremy has deep roots in the community, which has given him a unique perspective on the local market. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jeremy, you just heard the introduction. Jeremy has been my business partner since 2018. So super excited to have him on the show, and we could dive into some of the stories of us meeting and our journey throughout real estate together. But to start, I'd really like you to take us back to the early days, how you grew up, and then the first early part of your career.
Yeah, definitely. Grew up on Pensacola Beach, grew up in a newspaper family. My grandmother started and owned and operated the local Pensacola Beach newspaper at the time, the Islander newspaper. My mother also worked there, spent a lot of time in a newspaper office at a young age. You would not be able to tell that with my inability to be a creative writer, but definitely enjoyed that and was around kind of a entrepreneurial spirit from a young age. Although my grandmother did always say, never get in the newspaper business. Fast forward to college, I worked in retail for a national company and had done several summer internships and just assumed that after college, I would go to work in their corporate office. Did not end up getting that job in South Florida and moved back to Pensacola Beach. Had just gotten married right after graduating college, so it was time to find a job. And my grandmother was friends with Alan Levin and Robert Rinke. Said, go down to Portofino. Those guys have a lot going on. See what they might have available. Go meet with Robert and Alan. And my degree's in marketing. They knew that they were really looking for an advertising person.
What year is this?
This is in 2004. So the first phase of Portofino had been built. They're working on the next phase and then other developments on the beach. So they needed an advertising person. I quickly told them that is not me. My marketing background was on the technical side, consumer behavior, market research type stuff. But through the conversation, we talked a little bit about sales. And they said, hey, we have about 10 agents at the time. Why don't you go get your real estate license? And they probably thought they would never hear from me again. So I thanked them for their time and immediately started the process of getting my real estate license. Took a couple of weeks to get all signed up for the class, went through that. Another couple of weeks, had my license. I came back. I think they were surprised. So I was then a realtor with Levin Rinke Realty. This is before there was a lot of real estate education out there and the internet wasn't anything like it is now. Spent a lot of time in a development trailer trying to figure out the ropes of the business without really any resources to do that. So eventually I partnered up with another couple at a different company, spent 8 years really learning the business, came back to Levin Rinke in 2013, and then quickly from there got into the management level of the company and really grew my own business until ultimately joining the Mark Lee team in 2019.
And so I want to go a little deeper because I know this story a little bit more. So you said you got your real estate license in 2004. Mm-hmm. And that's when you were active realtor when you started with Robert and Alan, 2004?
Correct, yes.
And so what were the first 5, 6 years like being a realtor? And you were starting out at what, 22 years old?
I was 21 when I first got my license, quickly turned 22 later on that summer, but it was definitely a struggle. So, of course, we had Hurricane Ivan in 2004, shortly after I got my license. So it was a bit of a flurry, relocating people, stayed busy through the first part of 2005. And then in our area, I really feel like the summer of 2005 was the peak of the market. Things really started to slow down. And by that time, like 2006, my wife Rachel and I had built a home, and we still owned our first home that we had purchased. Here we are, 2006, 2007, going into a time where values have come way down, transactions have come way down. So not that I was making much money before, but now I really wasn't making much money. And Rachel had a fairly entry-level job at the time, and it was definitely a struggle having two pieces of real estate that I was upside down in and was always able to pay the bills, but barely, living off of credit cards. I remember getting down to about, I think it was $42 in my account after everything had been paid, and was reliant on a solely commission-based job. So certainly some interesting times there in my mid-20s.
So what did you do during those times? $40, you got a kid, you have two pieces of real estate, you're upside down in, you're in a commission-based job where the market is dead. What did you do?
Luckily, our son had not come around yet. So
Okay.
It was just the two of us and two golden retrievers to worry about. But I kept with it. I tried to get a couple of side jobs. And the funny thing about it, and I always thank these people later, I had tried to get a bartending job with one of my friends that owns a couple of bars. And he said, "I really like you, but no." I said, "We're not making sales. This is becoming a real struggle." He said, "Just stick with it. I'm not giving you this side job because it's really going to slow you down. You just got to stick with it." We just kept grinding. I got my community association manager license. So we took on a association management project. Not that paid much, but at least it was something. And years later, those relationships built there have led to a lot of real estate transactions. So that was a blessing later on. But at the end of the day, just stuck with real estate. And I knew that the people that got out and back in the business, they were going to have a headwind. They were going to have a period of time to reacclimate and catch back up. And by sticking it through, I definitely didn't have that. So when the market began to turn around, I was in the right spot.
And so you stuck with it, you kept the pedal down, and eventually things turned the corner. You started making a little bit of money. When did you buy your first piece of investment real estate that wasn't a home that you just ended up keeping?
So that was between 2012 and 2013. I bought a short sale triplex not far from my house in Gulf Breeze. Funny story about that one. We had received a settlement from the BP oil spill. And again, coming out of a time period where I didn't really have a lot of income or a lot of assets, I immediately thought that I would take that money and pay off our son's college. At that time, prepaid college was about $50,000. So I asked a good customer of mine that was an executive level at a local college, and he said, "Do not do that." I was curious about that. He said, bunch of pressure on upper level tuitions. You could see that number come down. So I took his advice and I used that money to buy a triplex. And I also thought, in 18 years when my son goes to college, hopefully this triplex is worth more than college tuition costs. So end up using the money, bought the triplex instead of the prepaid college. And the very next year, prepaid college went to 50% of what it was that year. And I was able to pay it off then.
Did you call that guy back and thank him?
I absolutely did. Mentioned it several times to him, how right he was about that. And again, how excited I was to get that property for, looking back on it, pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. And for people, those that aren't familiar with the Pensacola and Gulf Coast region, the BP oil spill was 2010. Is that correct?
Yep.
And so that was at the low point of the macroeconomic cycle in the United States, right? You're coming off the Great Recession in 2008 timeframe. And then on top of that, we had this massive BP oil spill that happened and affected the entire Gulf Coast, which set back businesses and definitely in our region, in our area, but especially Pensacola Beach. So if you thought it was slow and then you couple the BP oil spill on top of that, it was like dead. And I'm in high school at this time. I have no idea what's going on. I'm living a different world. And that turns out for some to be somewhat of a blessing in disguise, because there ended up being a lawsuit and there were decent sized checks. Did it cover your projected entire income, or how did that work out for you?
No, it definitely didn't work that way. They had these complicated metrics and they seemed to always be changing. And again, like you had mentioned, real estate was super slow then. So I almost felt like I spent a good chunk of my day at times resubmitting things to their website. And what ended up happening was, for a period of time, they said, we're going to classify real estate agents as a business. And so you could get what they were offering you plus an additional $25,000 to sign off that you're done with the lawsuit. Whereas like previously, I think they had classified realtors as some other subset of business and they were offering you $5,000. So once they changed that, and I had messed with this for quite a while, I said, tell me where to sign and we're moving on.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear. So you bought your first triplex. When was your next investment?
Later that year.
That year. So you got a little bit of a bug. You saw, you bought, and hindsight's always 2020, but you bought in 2012, which was like a great time to buy. And especially in our area, you got it rented, it was cash flowing. And then another opportunity came up.
Another opportunity came up just down the street, and I had a little bit of heartburn paying more than I had just paid, but that's sometimes a good problem to have, that you got that good of a deal on the first go round. I'd always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to own income producing real estate. As an entrepreneur, it's not like I had some kind of pension set up to where I was going to be set for life if I quit working at a certain age. Basically, if you quit working, your income goes to zero. I always knew that I wanted to have another source of income, and just coming off the Great Recession, where maxed out credit cards and very little money, I knew I never wanted to be back there again. So wanted a way to replace my income.
And I don't know this, but I don't think there was as much education around real estate investment as there is today on the internet and Bigger Pockets and all these different channels that you can learn about investing in real estate. How did you start learning about income producing real estate?
Definitely learned the hard way and in an inefficient manner, to the point where I'm over there making little repairs, doing things that aren't even a skill set that I really possess. So through a lot of hard work and mistakes, I would forget that somebody didn't even pay rent, and they'd call and say, hey, I know I'm a month behind, and I'd have to just play it cool and be like, yeah, I knew you were good for it, but I had no clue that they didn't pay. Because at the time, that those properties, which I still own today, they were across the street from a bank. So I started an account at that bank, and tenants would go and just deposit cash in So it was cumbersome to keep up with who paid and who didn't. And they're always changing cell phone numbers and things. So at that point, I knew that I like owning the real estate, but I might not be the best one to track all this.
So, Jeremy, we were introduced through Robert Rinke, who's a developer here in Pensacola Beach and has a real estate company. And he references Jeremy as a money-making machine. And I personally look to Jeremy as my de facto financial advisor. Jeremy is super sharp in the market. He's listened to Jim Cramer on 2x speed, which if you ever get into his car, it's like I have a seizure because you have Jim Cramer who already speaks 1,000,000 miles a minute, and then you put him in 2x and he's going crazy on the mic. So where did this interest for learning about how money works and how it operates? Because not only is Jeremy, and we might touch on this, but he scales up a real estate sales business where he's doing 20 plus million bucks, making $500,000 plus a year in active income in his real estate sales business, but he's putting his money to work. So talk to me a little bit, because it doesn't sound like you had entrepreneur family, but it doesn't sound like you had exposure to how money works and making and multiplying it. Talk to me about your personal journey through learning about money and how it works.
Sure. Yeah, definitely didn't grow up specifically with anybody with a finance type or real estate type of a background. The real estate part we just talked about, that was figuring it out as I went and looking for a way to replace my income. I definitely became more interested in the stock market as time went on. And really, that was through a lot of my own research. I had started a small portfolio in college through a broker, but that never really did anything. And I never had any extra money to put into that until later in my late 20s or even into my early 30s. So it was just a lot of podcasts, a lot of books. I enjoy reading about the market pretty much more than I enjoy reading anything else. From there, it was, I've always been, even with real estate, I'm the same way on the market. You just keep buying. It's a long-term thing. I'm not often really in and out of a lot of stuff. I'm a long-term guy. You just keep buying and don't get upset when there's big fluctuations. Sometimes that's your best buying opportunity, just like in real estate.
Yeah, and I can attest to Jeremy's mindset on his investment philosophy is similar to his emotional IQ or EQ, I call it. Like, he is as stoic and as doesn't get high or low. And that's truthfully why we make such a good partnership, I think, because like I am way more emotional and like ready to rock and roll. And basically every deal we see is, hey, this is it. Like, we're rolling on it. And Jeremy's like, all right, just relax. Let's look at the numbers and yada, yada, yada.
You know, I always tell people that we make good partners because you're all gas and I'm all brakes.
Exactly. And I definitely value that because I know that I have a high risk tolerance and I like to take action. And so I always value Jeremy's input a lot. So I'd like to talk through your mindset, or let me back up. I'd like to talk to say who or what has helped you develop your mindset to where it is today.
Coming from a business where you're a sole operator in real estate, I didn't have a lot of management experience and team building experience. I've had a lot of great mentors in real estate, but realistically, I think the 7 or so years that we've been working together, investing together, those have definitely changed my mindset into a much more intentional, much more focused. Realistically, I would say that you've been one of the bigger influences on the business mindset that I have now here over the last handful of years. Through the different books that you've shared and just always a new podcast, our resource.
Yeah, and I think it's grown over time, right? I'd like to get your perspective on our first couple deals. We know about these because we've lived it, but tell the people listening how we met and what that was like.
I think the first deal that we did together was a listing opportunity that I had that came up with a price to the seller, and it involved a home that needed significant repair and a vacant lot. And so you and I had talked about it and came up with a plan. We made it work on both the remodel for the home and then built not your first spec home, but definitely the only one I had been involved with. That was a success. I don't remember too many hiccups along the way there. I know that was earlier in your construction career, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a good experience. And I think it showed us that we can put the numbers to paper, execute it, and make it work.
Yeah, and so that was 2018. I remember the dates like it's crazy. The first closing, so this was on Nagel Drive in Cordova Park, and it was a really rundown home, but in a great area. Had a double lot where there was zero other land around it, and bought it, split off the lot, remodeled the house, sold it, took that money, built the house. And so this is probably, call it a 16-month thing probably, because right as we're about to sell the home, and we had obviously spent a lot more time, a full year of getting to know each other, talking all the time about this project, and I started learning from Jeremy and Bigger Pockets and all the other resources about income producing real estate, and realized that Jeremy and I work together because have completely opposite skill sets. And a 14-unit apartment building came up for sale right as we were closing the house on Dumfries.
Right.
And that property came on the market. We put a bid on it and lost. Then it came back on the market. It fell through for whatever reason. And then we ended up buying this 14-unit deal. And that was December of 2019.
Correct. Yeah. There are several good stories that go along with that closing. From we signed the paperwork and we literally leave the closing to go to the seller's quote unquote property manager's trunk and collect Ziploc bags of unlabeled keys that we needed to figure out. And then Kyle and I were obviously super hands-on with the management, and this was just us in 2019. And one of our first actions that we knew we needed to do is post notices on the property of, here's the new ownership information, here's our phone numbers, here's where you need to send your rent. As we're doing that, there's about 3 police cars there. And this property's in a really good area. I mean, this isn't an area of high crime or anything, but as we pull up, 3 police cars are there, and a near fight breaks out between one of the residents and about 4 police officers. So we looked at each other with wide eyes and our Ziploc bags full of unlabeled keys. Are we sure about this?
Let's tell them about the rent increase tomorrow.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that guy's name was Dennis, Crazy Dennis, if I remember correctly. Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah.
And so it's been this organic kind of one deal, and we still have our separate businesses at this point. It's 2019. Jeremy's still going full bore and still is today, selling general real estate and building that side of the business. I have other partnerships and building homes, selling real estate, doing my deal. And it slowly became more through that one or these couple projects and having a little bit of success. And then we buy a 6-unit deal, build a duplex, buy a 14-unit deal, and then we're 30 units and no more money. So talk a little bit about some of the conversations or stories or thought processes from going from 30 units, you've got your portfolio outside of it, which is 10 or so.
10, yeah.
To now, today, we have 200 units with another 250 in the pipeline to develop or buy in the next couple months?
It became apparent to us to operate the properties how we wanted to and to give the properties the correct attention they need. You really needed scale. So here we are with the problem. We're out of money. How do we scale? So I think that's when we started really exploring the syndication models, bringing on investors and able to grow the portfolio that way. Closed our first syndication in September of 2023. It's been a great performer. Then the following April, closed the next syndication. The first one was 90 units. The second one was 98 units. It's been a great performer. Currently working on our third syndication.
Third and fourth right behind it, new development. We're super excited. 138 unit new development that hopefully breaks ground in middle to end of third quarter of this year. It's definitely been a great ride, and we're learning as we go. We're super hands-on, and Jeremy, don't let him fool you. He is very determined, motivated, and in the weeds, very much so on the operational side. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've gone through here recently in this business?
With the ups and downs in the economy and the interest rates where they are, both sides of the real estate business, sales and investment side, have been slower. So I think it's been a challenge, but it's true that real estate in general is one of the most stable asset classes and a tremendous builder of wealth. So going back to some of those fundamental principles and making sure that your customers, your investors are educated in that has been an important component recently, for sure, with all the economic volatility.
Yeah, that's a good point. Our investment thesis is pretty simple. We're trying to buy properties that have historically the lowest rent in the best locations, because no matter the economic cycle, there's always someone that needs an affordable place to live, right? So it's a relatively simple investment thesis. We're focused from Baldwin to Bay County. We currently own Baldwin, Escambia, and Santa Rosa County properties. And so it's right here along the Gulf Coast. We have a management company in-house. I'm a general contractor, so we handle our construction and management all in-house, and we're very hands-on, and we'll see where it goes. I'd like to pivot the conversation a little bit, and Barrett is 13 years old.
Yep, 13.
13 years old, and Jeremy's always sending videos, and I have little children, so I'm living vicariously through Jeremy at the stage he's in, and he's always sending me different training videos, different sports videos. So I'd like to know, what role has your faith, family, or community played in your journey?
It's played a big role, and I definitely think that, especially when you become a parent, a lot of things change, and you really can focus on that why. That's, at least for me, was a lot harder to pin down and determine 15 years ago. It's played a big role, and I feel like every decision is basically tied back to that why. And when you think about family and all the long hours and everything that you're doing, it certainly makes it easier and definitely makes it worth it. Yeah, it's played a big part.
And what about legacy? So the show's called Legacy Builders, and it's something that we like to touch on each episode. When you think about the word legacy, what does that word mean to you?
To me, it means what you leave behind. And that's not just material items by any means. More than anything, your integrity, the way you made people feel, your reputation. When I think about legacy, I, of course, want to leave the mentorship and resources to make things easier for the next generation. And hopefully they continue that legacy and pass down those kinds of things. But it's very important, your reputation, you're always doing things the right way, because you want people to think back and say that doing business with him or being his friend was always a good experience.
Yeah, and I would think that you and Rachel are definitely on the right track and leaving the legacy. Everyone enjoys doing business with you guys. You guys have a sterling reputation and are very involved with Barrett, raising a great, well-mannered, respectful young man, almost.
Yeah.
Scary to see. Last time I saw him, he was like looking me eye to eye in my driveway. And I'm like, damn it, dude, with his size 14 foot. I'd like to ask another question that I haven't asked before, but what's a belief or something that you have that others might disagree with? And I know this is a different question, so it's putting you on the spot, but does something come to mind when you think about something that you definitely believe in that others might be like, I don't know about that?
The first thing that popped into my mind is the level of work ethic that I have, and definitely family first. Don't get me wrong, but I will work on stuff all different times of the evening, early morning, weekends, to where I probably at times haven't taken enough time for myself. I just built my business that way and wanted to do what it took at the time to not go back to barely being able to provide for my family. So that hasn't really changed for me with success. I still probably work too much is what some people would consider, but that's just been the way I was raised and the way I started my career. That was the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to bring up because there's a level of sacrifice that it takes to perform at a certain level. And especially when you're a business owner and when you're signing on millions of dollars worth of debt and you're focused on growth and you've got all of these things stacked up, there's a level of work and sacrifice it takes that not everyone is willing to do. Nathan Cox shares, you want what I have, but you're not willing to do what I do. You're not willing to make the choices and take the action and live the life that I live. And I think about that with you. It's definitely something that probably a lot of people disagree with, right? The work-life balance. And it's not to say you can't be present with your family and spend time with your family and have your priorities in order, but there's still a level of work that's required. And between you and Rachel, you guys definitely work. And it's something that a lot of people probably disagree with. I 100% agree with. That's how I was raised. That's what I believe in as well, that it's faith, family, and work. I mean, I interviewed my grandpa the other day and he echoes that sentiment. That's the life, right? And
Right.
I think that's a great answer. A couple more questions and then we'll wrap this up. If you could today send a text to your 20-year-old self, what would you say?
Oh, wow. Beyond all the correct Super Bowl picks between then and now, I definitely would say keep working hard. Don't get discouraged. Keep focused on the long term and do the right thing, and it'll all work out.
Love it. Love it. We've hit everything that I really wanted to touch on today. I'm extremely grateful for our relationship. Jeremy's not only a business partner, but one of my best friends. There was a time that Jeremy and I would be texting so much just about whatever it is going on business-wise that Peyton would be like, who are you texting? Your boyfriend, Jeremy? And so we've spent a ton of time together. There's roughly, how old are you, 42?
42, yeah.
42, so there's a 11, 12-year age gap between us, but definitely super close. And I don't think that I'd be where I am at without you for a lot of different reasons. And so extremely grateful for that and extremely grateful for we've been in business 7 years, so next 7 years.
Yeah, and I will say that don't let Kyle's age fool you. He is wise beyond his years. Definitely have learned a lot from you as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. If people want to connect with you, where can they reach out? Where can they connect with you?
Social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, easy to find there.
Yep. And we'll put a link to all of those in the show notes. So again, thanks, Jeremy. I think that the listeners will get a lot out of this. And just a couple key takeaways is keep going. Don't quit. There's going to be times of challenge. There's going to be times of suck. But as long as you keep at it every single day, things will go on the up and up. And we're still in the middle of it. So
Nothing's easy.
Yep. So with that, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.